There are relationships that don't need shouting or arguments, yet still leave you drained. It's when you walk away from a conversation feeling smaller, when you wait for a message with a heaviness in your chest, or when you suppress your emotions just to keep the peace. Many believe that being family, old friends, or familiar co-workers gives them the right to test your limits. But the sad truth is, the closer they are, the easier it is for them, whether by accident or intent, to hurt you the most. Stoic philosophy does not teach us to be cold. It teaches us to live with clarity. And clarity means having the courage to see when a relationship is no longer a connection, but a burden. Today, we'll talk about 5 behaviors you should never tolerate, not because you're rigid, but because you've begun to understand the value of inner peace. And when you protect that peace, you're learning how to live rightly, not for others, but for yourself. 1. Constant criticism. Not all wounds draw blood. Some cut deeper in silence through soft words, repeated often, seeping into your mind like water dripping on stone. Slow, steady, corrosive. You don't recognize the harm at first. A light remark about your clothes, a casual, "Why are you always so slow?" A furrowed brow when you speak about your dreams all seem harmless. You think they probably didn't mean anything by it. So you stay silent. But what's frightening is that you begin adjusting not to grow, but to avoid remarks, avoid judgment, or simply to keep others pleased. You stop sharing your ideas for fear they'll be shut down. You censor what you want to say, even the emotions you want to express. Phrases like, "You should lose weight," "Why choose that kind of job?" or "That doesn't suit you," may not sound like attacks, but they carry a quiet message. That you are not enough, not good enough, not attractive enough, not right enough. And when these words come from family, a partner, or close friends, they strike harder. Because you trust them. You believe they won't hurt you. Until one day you find yourself shrinking, always cautious, always guarded, always bracing for the next comment, even when choosing what shirt to wear before stepping outside. The truth is, the one criticizing you may not mean to cause harm, but pain is not found in intent, it lies in the impact. You don't need to be yelled at to feel insulted. A repeated statement, delivered with the same dismissive tone, carves a narrative into your mind. I'm wrong, I'm not good enough, I need to try harder just to be accepted. And so, you fall into a loop, not striving for yourself, but trying to escape the constant judgment of others. Stoic philosophy does not teach us to retaliate in anger, but to observe with clarity. When an interaction consistently leaves you smaller, when conversations leave you breathless and hollow, it's no longer feedback. It's verbal manipulation, cloaked in concern. You don't need to argue. You only need to be clear-eyed enough to recognize the repeating pattern and to see this isn't you being too sensitive. This is your inner strength being quietly eroded. And that's why naming the behavior is the first step to ending its power over you. Because self-respect should never be traded for keeping the peace. If you allow constant micro-criticisms to go unchecked, there will come a day when you no longer recognize yourself, not because you changed, but because you were slowly worn down from within by seemingly harmless words. That is not love. That is a subtle invasion, but it can stop with one simple choice: to no longer receive it as if it were normal. In many families, pain doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the ones closest to you. A father's cold remark, a mother's endless comparisons, a sibling's careless comment, each can etch itself into your mind with the weight of blood ties. Because they are family. You forgive easily, dismiss quickly, and call it just how things are. And that's the trap. because once closeness becomes a license for repeated harm, it ceases to be love. It becomes a form of violation, disguised by kinship. No one is born knowing how to set boundaries with their parents, siblings, or spouse. We are raised to respect our elders, to be obedient, to believe that they say it because they care. But sometimes, beneath those words of love lies a pattern of control where you are not allowed to be yourself without judgment. When you express disagreement, the response is often, "We only want what's best for you," or "Don't take it the wrong way, I'm just giving advice." But what hurts you isn't who says it, it's that you're denied the right to feel, to respond, and to be yourself in that relationship. Family is not a place where you must constantly endure for the sake of harmony. Nor is it a false, safe space where you must bend yourself into being pleasant, agreeable, or easy to handle. Any relationship, no matter how close, that makes you question your worth, makes you feel disrespected, or forces you to shrink just to exist, is one that needs to be reevaluated. In Stoic thought, clarity is the highest form of respect. If you can't say you're hurt, that you feel judged, then what remains isn't family. It's emotional dependence wrapped in the disguise of love. Many confuse bluntness with the right to hurt. They believe that being a sibling, a parent, or someone who once helped you gives them the right to say anything, however they please. But the truth is, no one, no matter how close, has the right to make you feel small again and again. Past help is not a permanent license to control or belittle. Real love walks hand in hand with care, with the awareness that our words can wound deeply. And when that awareness is missing, replaced by, "I say it because I care," then perhaps they do not truly understand what caring means. We cannot change others, but we can change what we accept. Remember, someone who truly loves you will never use words to grind you down. They will not use closeness as an excuse to be careless or irresponsible with your feelings. In the Stoic world, peace comes from self-mastery, and that begins the moment you realize this. You owe no one the right to harm you, not even the ones closest to you. 2. Overstepping personal boundaries. Some actions do not wound with words, but with indifference. A relative walks into your home with a key, unannounced, leaves a bag on your kitchen counter, and leaves as if it's nothing. A friend borrows your phone, casually scrolls through a private message, and makes a vague comment. A partner checks your wallet, asks about your spending, and calls it care. Each act seems minor on its own, perhaps even wrapped in good intention. But repeated often, they form a silent breach, one where your boundaries aren't shattered with noise, but slowly eroded through convenience and quiet. That's what makes this kind of violation dangerous. It doesn't spark an immediate reaction. It creates a vague unease, a subtle discomfort you can't quite name. You feel bothered, but ask yourself, am I overreacting? You want to draw the line, but fear being seen as cold or distant. So you hold it in, first with silence, then with tolerance. And by the time you notice, your private space no longer belongs to you. For the one crossing the line, the behavior may stem from habit, from an environment where privacy wasn't seen as necessary, where closeness meant complete access. But whatever the reason, intimacy should never be used as a license to ignore someone's boundaries. You can understand why they act that way, but that doesn't mean you must allow it to continue. Every time you stay silent, they learn that the intrusion is normal, acceptable, harmless. Stoicism doesn't teach us to fear or rage against others' actions. It teaches us to take responsibility for what we control, and one of the first things you can and should protect is your personal boundary. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Likewise, you have power over your time, your space, and your silence. Someone else's convenience cannot be the reason you surrender your inner peace. Protecting boundaries doesn't mean you lack love. It means you've learned to distinguish healthy closeness from intrusion masked as affection. You can stay kind, but not silent. And often, clarity in the smallest moments becomes the strongest act of self-respect. What's most unsettling isn't that a stranger might hurt you, but that someone you trust uses closeness to justify crossing the line. They don't break boundaries with violence, but with familiarity. They don't knock because we're family. They don't ask because we're close. But behind that comfort, they quietly strip you of agency, making you feel guilty for wanting to keep even a small part of yourself. And worse, when you speak up, they don't listen. They strike back with emotion. Why would you think I'm controlling? You don't trust me anymore. I'm just looking out for you. Is that wrong? At that point, you're not just defending your boundary, you're fending off guilt for having one in the first place. In the hands of the wise, closeness nurtures trust and respect. In the hands of the unaware or manipulative, it becomes a tool of control. They bring up past favors, shared struggles, or moments of support and use them as emotional debt to pressure you into accepting what makes you uncomfortable. And when you begin to distance yourself, they call you ungrateful, changed, or detached from family or friendship. It's a familiar form of emotional manipulation, and it's hard to detect when you've lived too long in the blurred space between love and control. Stoic philosophy doesn't urge you to cut ties the moment you're hurt. It asks you to live with clarity, with sovereignty, without confusion between kindness and violation. Seneca once said, "Peace of mind is not achieved by being treated well by others, but by knowing what you will not tolerate." A loved one may hurt you once without intending to, but when it becomes a pattern, cloaked in emotional excuses, that closeness is no longer a foundation, it's a silent chain that keeps you from being fully yourself. Closeness should never be weaponized to make someone feel guilty for setting boundaries. True affection requires no special permission to approach it, respects the will to connect. You don't need to sacrifice clarity for comfort. And if a relationship only survives when you continue to ignore what suffocates you, then perhaps it's not a relationship to preserve, but a lesson to carry forward with your dignity intact. 3. Manipulation and distortion of truth. There is a kind of wound no one sees, yet it sinks deep into the core of the mind. No one yells in your face. No one insults you outright. But after every conversation, you walk away with a strange feeling. Vague, anxious, unsure of yourself. You thought you understood what happened, but they say you're overreacting. You're certain you remember the story, but they insist you imagined it. You feel hurt, only to be convinced it's just your sensitivity. Gradually, you can no longer tell which feelings are real, which memories are accurate, or which thoughts are reasonable. And worst of all, you start to believe the problem is you. In the world of emotional manipulation, the truth isn't denied outright. It's slowly bent out of shape. The manipulator doesn't hurt you in obvious ways. They just plant small seeds of doubt, enough to make you lose trust in your own ability to think and feel clearly. At first, it's simple phrases like, "I don't remember saying that," or "You're over-analyzing." Then come the sweeping conclusions. "You're always negative. You always assume the worst of me. Nobody else sees a problem, only you." And the more you try to defend your perception, the more you're labeled difficult, irrational, or too controlling. So you pull back. You go quiet. You start adjusting your emotions to please others, not because you believe they're right, but because you're too tired to believe in yourself. From a Stoic point of view, this is when you lose one of your most valuable assets: reason. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The soul is most violated when it allows falsehood to replace truth." And the falsehood in emotional manipulation doesn't come loudly from the outside, it arises quietly from within, when you begin to wonder if your reactions are excessive, if you're wrong and don't know it. In truth, this isn't weakness. It's the natural result of living too long near someone who constantly denies your lived experience. You can be strong, rational, independent, and still find yourself doubting who you are when manipulation is subtle enough, persistent enough. This doesn't make you weak. It only shows that you care, that you listen, that you reflect, and those exact virtues are used against you to blur your compass. But eventually you realize, no one has the right to make you question your own mind just to keep a relationship. Someone who truly loves you helps you see more clearly, stand more firmly, not fall apart in every feeling or decision. So if you often find yourself asking, is it my fault? Or was I out of line? Pause and examine the pattern. Sometimes it's the invisible exhaustion, the nameless worry after every conversation that reveals you've lost your grip on your own inner world. And when that happens, it's time to stop trying to understand them and start returning to understand and protect yourself. There are people who won't apologize for hurting you, they'll make you apologize for feeling hurt. They won't deny their unkind words or thoughtless actions. Instead, they shift the focus through emotion. I said that because I care about you. I only did it because I worry for you. If I didn't love you, I wouldn't bother. And suddenly, instead of being heard, you're explaining yourself, softening your tone, feeling guilty for rejecting a wrong just because it came from someone close. This is a common form of manipulation in intimate relationships. The person doesn't deny the behavior, they wrap it in sentiment to neutralize your response. They don't ask for your forgiveness. They make you feel that withholding it is a moral failure. They convince you that your sensitivity, your reaction, is the real cause of conflict, not their actions. And over time, you learn to silence your emotions, not to live in harmony, but to avoid blame. From a deeper perspective, this doesn't just affect isolated situations. It slowly undermines your entire emotional foundation. You begin to question your boundaries, wonder whether asking for respect is selfish. You hesitate to speak up, not because you don't see the wrong, but because you fear losing the relationship. But as Stoicism teaches, love should never come at the cost of reason. Epictetus once said, "No one can make you feel ashamed unless you allow them to use your emotions against you." And someone who truly loves you will never rely on emotional tactics to silence you. They will listen, not excuse their faults, with the language of affection. There is a simple truth that's often forgotten. Wrong is still wrong, no matter who commits it. Care does not entitle one to cross lines. Kindness is not a shield against accountability, and true love never makes your pain seem unreasonable. If someone hurts you but always makes you feel guilty for reacting, that is not love, it is control. And no one deserves to hold power over your emotions or your reason simply because they say they love you. In Stoic philosophy, a healthy relationship is where reason remains intact, emotion is respected, and truth stays clear. If a relationship demands that you give up clarity, give up feeling, give up yourself just to keep it from breaking, then it may have broken long ago, and you just haven't had the courage to call it by its name. Sometimes, awakening doesn't come from saving the relationship. It comes from knowing when to walk away to save yourself. 4. Persistent dishonesty. Not every betrayal comes from a grand deception. Sometimes, what breaks a relationship are the small lies repeated quietly, carelessly, a moment of forgetting to inform, a lie told to smooth things over, a promise made easily but never kept at first. You let them go. You think it's just temporary, a slip. But when they become habit, they're no longer accidental. Their choice is choosing convenience over truth, escape over responsibility, and it's these small things that fracture the foundation of every relationship: trust. You begin to feel uneasy not because they lied about something major, but because you no longer know what's real and what's just meant to pacify. You hear a sentence and think, is it true this time? You no longer feel reassured by promises because none of them hold to the end. And the deepest pain is watching yourself change. From someone who trusted to someone who checks. From someone who shared openly to someone who now guards every word. Openness gives way to caution. Trust gives way to suspicion, not because you wanted it, but because you were made to defend yourself too many times. In Stoic thought, honesty is not just a moral virtue, it is the foundation of a strong inner life. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it." In a world where words can be used to avoid reality, choosing truth is a powerful act. Because lies, no matter how small, when repeated, change how we see the person who speaks and, more importantly, change how we see the world. When you live beside someone who constantly distorts truth, you slowly lose faith in your ability to sense truth in other relationships. Doubt spreads not just about them, but about yourself. That's the deepest damage. You stop knowing when to trust your own instincts. Every time you give trust, you're forced into defense. Every time you hope, you're forced to prepare for disappointment. It's a quiet erosion not from a single blow, but from the slow drip of broken promises and half-truths. So if you find yourself needing to double-check, memorize details, scan emotions just to keep a relationship from spiraling, perhaps what you're trying to preserve is already gone. Trust. And Stoicism would say, when truth no longer has a place, attachment becomes illusion. That's the moment to stop, not to punish someone else, but to protect your own clarity of mind. Some lies aren't harsh, cold, or easy to detect. They come with sad eyes, a firm grip on your hand, or soft words like, "I didn't want to hurt you. I was afraid you'd be upset. I only wanted to protect you." And because they wear the shape of care, these lies confuse you even more. You don't know whether to be angry or to empathize. You don't know if it's carelessness or clumsy affection, and then you begin to forgive not because it feels right, but because you don't want to seem cold when they appear vulnerable. The danger in lies wrapped in emotion is this: they target your kindness. The liar doesn't just dodge accountability, they use your trust and compassion as shields. Every time they're caught, they don't face the truth, they redirect with emotion. "I tried my best. I just didn't want to lose you. I was too overwhelmed to think straight." They don't admit they lied, they make you feel guilty for forcing the truth out. In the end, the one hurt ends up soothing, softening, keeping the peace just to avoid being labeled too harsh. And then, you start doing the most dangerous thing: justifying for them. You tell yourself they didn't mean it. They're going through a hard time. Everyone lies sometimes. But what you don't see is that repeating these excuses doesn't make them more honest. It only numbs you to the pain. Stoic philosophy reminds us that truth is the root of clarity. If you keep trading truth just to feel close, the relationship will soon become a stage where you play the role of the understanding one, and they play the regretful one, but no one truly changes. Epictetus once taught, "Don't be angry at those who deceive you. Be awake enough to stop letting lies rule. He wasn't blaming the victim, but reminding us that we are responsible for the boundaries we enforce. If someone keeps lying and only adjusts their emotions, not their actions, then those emotions become tools not of healing, but of keeping the lie alive. Not through bold deception, but through soft manipulations that keep you entangled. You cannot build trust on pity. Someone who truly repents won't stop at tears or apologies. They will show change through consistent action. And if all they offer is feeling with no effort to change, then your doubt isn't wrong. It's wisdom. And in the Stoic spirit, wisdom is never cruelty. Wisdom is honesty with oneself, the courage to face the truth even when it hurts, and the strength to end a cycle you've been trapped in for far too long. 5. Disguise disrespect in the form of humor. Not everyone realizes that a joke can wound more deeply than a direct criticism, especially when that joke comes from family, friends, or co-workers, those who know you well and know exactly what could hurt the most. They laugh, others laugh, but you stay silent, your smile frozen in place like a reflex for survival. Inside, you feel exposed, mocked, and worst of all, misunderstood. You don't dare respond, because if you do, you'll be labeled humorless, overly sensitive, or someone who can't take a joke. At first, you think it was just a careless moment, but then it happens again. One day, it's a joke about your appearance. Another, about your work, your relationship, or even the pain you've gone through. The tone is always light, just enough to make others laugh while you remain silent. It's no longer a joke. It's disrespect disguised as humor. And when you begin to brace yourself before every gathering, preparing for the usual joke, that relationship is no longer safe. What makes this kind of disrespect dangerous is that it leaves no clear evidence to push back against. No one shouts, no one insults outright. Yet you feel stabbed by something invisible in front of everyone. And if you speak up, you're met with denial. It was just a joke. You're being too serious. We're close, that's why we tease you. These words are crafted to invalidate your feelings and push the blame back onto you as if you're the one ruining the moment, not the person who turned you into the punchline. Stoic philosophy doesn't reject humor. But it asks a clear question. Does this laughter create connection or domination? Does it ease the heart or cause retreat? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let what you say be like medicine meant to heal, not to wound." A real joke never shames anyone, especially not the one who isn't laughing. You may be someone who enjoys fun, who has a good sense of humor, who can laugh at yourself. But that doesn't mean you must become a permanent target for careless remarks. A healthy relationship never requires you to fake joy to be accepted. It never forces you to smile when all you want is to leave the table. If you feel belittled every time there's a crowd, if someone always picks the exact sore spot to tease with love, then that's not friendship. That's a stage. And you've been cast as the one who endures so others can feel comfortable. Sadly, many live their entire lives in relationships like this without realizing they're being disrespected. They call it old school affection, close talk, or just being blunt. But anything that consistently hurts you, anything that erodes your comfort just by being present, cannot be excused by the word closeness. In the Stoic spirit, what you must protect isn't just your dignity, but your clarity. The clarity to know. If a joke leaves you feeling hurt, then it is no longer a joke. And if that person refuses to change after you speak your truth, perhaps they no longer deserve your genuine laughter at all. There is also a form of disrespect that doesn't wear a smile, doesn't pretend to be funny. It comes dressed in seriousness, with words sharp as knives. I'm just being honest. Someone had to say it. I'm blunt, not fake. These statements are often framed as sincerity, but what you feel is coldness, harshness, and a total disregard for how their words land. You don't feel guided, you feel judged, not understood, just condemned. Their so-called truth isn't meant to support you. It's a weapon used to diminish, to place you below them, to silence you with guilt for not smiling through a truth that stings. Truth, when shared with goodwill, always comes with tact, timing, tone, and purpose, to help, not to harm. But when someone uses bluntness to throw lines like, "Who would love someone like you?" "You're never going to succeed," or "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking," what they're really showing isn't truth, it's power. The power to speak without care. The power to hurt, then hide behind just being honest, as though that's some kind of noble excuse. But bluntness without compassion is not truth, it's cruelty disguised. In Stoic philosophy, words are tools of reason, not tools of impulse. Seneca wrote, "The wise person says only what must be said, not all that can be said." That means not every truth should be spoken, and not all truth is free from the burden of its consequences. If you use truth to make others feel small, ashamed, or defeated, you're not communicating, you're overpowering. And if, after your truth, the other person doesn't feel understood but merely criticized, your words have failed morally, no matter how accurate they are. The danger is that many accept this form of blunt truth for years, believing they must toughen up, learn to take it, or that this is simply part of intimacy. But Stoicism would remind you, you are not required to accept cruelty just because it comes dressed as honesty. You can hear feedback without enduring insult. You can receive truth without bowing to condescension. Growth isn't found in silence through pain, but in recognizing the difference between wisdom and a wound. And if someone always defends their hurtful words by saying, "I'm just being honest," while you find yourself shrinking, doubting, or feeling stripped of your self-worth, then what they seek may not be truth, but control. And you have every right to stand up and walk away from that conversation, not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough to protect your clarity and your self-respect. I used to think that enduring a little discomfort in relationships was normal. That if someone joked a bit too harshly, misspoke, or wasn't entirely honest, it was best to let it go for the sake of peace. But the older I get, the more I realize. The things we consider small, if repeated often enough, become cracks in our very sense of self-respect. No one is born with self-doubt, with the feeling of not being enough, or with guardedness in communication. These are shaped by unhealthy interactions we've tolerated for too long. And I've learned this: love never means accepting repeated harm. Family ties, closeness, or a good past cannot justify someone crossing boundaries and disturbing the peace within your mind. You can be forgiving, but you also have the right to say, "That's enough." If this message resonates with you in any way, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next content. Because you deserve to live with clarity, with no apologies, no justifications, and no need to pretend you're okay. See you in the next video.